Good afternoon. Practice makes permanent. It's a well-known saying, and one that I think we should be a little bit careful. We should handle it delicately, perhaps wearing gloves. Because if you think about it for a moment, you see, practice makes permanent. Well, there are certain things we don't want to become permanent or crystallized. Certainly in a Tai-Chi world where we want movement and fluidity constantly. So practice, conscious practice, is a very different story than practicing just like that. So permanently means crystallized, and you know the expression old habits die hard, and it takes a long time to undo something which is being built into the body especially. I know what I'm talking about here because I've had the experience when I first encountered my teacher with whom I worked for 22 years. I had done some Tai Chi practice, I had some form work in my body, but it was not correct. And it took me well over a year to let go of what I had previously acquired in order to create the space to learn something new and correctly from the foundation. So we have to be careful when we practice. It's always better to practice less and to practice consciously than to practice and like that. Practice, as is the title of this little piece, should be a pleasure. Not all the time, I will explain, but in general, one should be like enthusiastic to practice. Tai Chi is marvelous, and the more you practice, the more benefits you get. Now, traditionally, we say in Tai Chi, one day's practice is one day's result. I find personally that one day's practice is usually good for a couple of days. I'm not suggesting that one doesn't practice every day. I think that one should practice 6 days a week, unless you are maybe from the Far East, and then traditionally there's 7 days a week. The Tai Chi form, the Yang style Tai Chi, the form is 22 minutes long. We usually do standing before for about 10 minutes, so that's about 30 minutes a day minimum. If you can do 30 minutes a day minimum, you will progress and you will get positive benefits. Presuming, of course, that you continue to take classes and improve refine what you're doing. So the pleasure of movement comes when you get past, at the beginning it's a little difficult, but you need to have some material that you feel comfortable with and that you can enjoy and play with and explore and experiment with. If you only know four or five movements, that's not really enough to get this feeling of the flow of movement. The flow that is one of the key enjoyment principles of Tai Chi Chuan. So we want to practice as often as possible. We want to avoid the pitfall of too much practice, too much training, burn out the body. This is not good. It burns the chi. So we need to find a balance here. Regular practice is imperative if you want to progress. If you go to a class once a week and you don't practice, it's going to take a very long time. Even if you're consistent and you go to every class, it will take a very long time before you acquire something that will give you benefits and results. So regular practice, like I just mentioned, the form, long form plus standing, that's half an hour a day, that should be minimum. Then one should do exercises on top of that. Things that I have demonstrated elsewhere on this channel, and I will demonstrate further in the future. Also, we take sequences from the form and practice those separately. This is imperative. The 37 essential movements that you can find on this channel, there are sequences there that you should definitely separate from the form practice and practice them independently. Same with standing postures, imperative. They build up the qi, they develop the pang jing, connect the body, and they have many, 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 many benefits. So the pleasure movement, once you get a certain body of work within your practice, the pleasure is really moving in space, feeling all kinds of sensations that are generally very agreeable, pleasant, sometimes even stronger than that. So I would encourage you, therefore, obviously, to practice as often as you can. Now, when to practice? This is a question that comes up from time to time. One person kind of with more wisdom than me that I saw in an interview said right away, anytime. And that is an excellent advice. Practice anytime. Anytime you have time and a space, practice. Even if you can only practice the first part of the form, for example, or even several sequences of movements, this is good. My teacher told me that he was a grocer for a long time in Chinatown, Montreal. Across the street from him, on the other side of the street, there was another grocer, and there was a gentleman there who didn't practice Tai Chi Chuan, but he did practice Jiang Zhong. And my teacher said that that man, in his grocery, whenever he had a moment free, he would stand. Sometimes he would just stand 20 seconds, and the doorbell would ring, and someone would come in looking for service. But he took every opportunity to practice as much as he could, and he got the results from that. So that's a wonderful attitude. So anytime. Anywhere, unfortunately, is not the same. There's not the same opening, at least from my experience. It depends on your character. Personally, I do not like practicing in public, in the park or other outdoor spaces. I don't like people watching me when I'm practicing, and also dogs, they tend to not like Tai Chi. I don't know, maybe it's just my Tai Chi, but they come, but not all dogs, but some dogs react to the strange movement or the vibration or the energy, or I'm not sure what, but they react, and that can be disturbing. I do practice in parks. I'm contradicting myself, but that's usually when the park is closed, or very early in the morning before dawn, when the park is basically empty, apart from this occasional drunk from the night before who's not yet hit the straw. That is agreeable to practice in the park before dawn when the weather is okay. I live in Quebec, so in the winter that's a no-no. But many months of the year, nevertheless, one can practice. I practice before dawn, or I did until I moved recently into the countryside, and now I'm living in a different reality where I have my own space outside, so that's wonderful. If you want to play the entire form, you need a large practice space, and that's unfortunately not always easy to come by, which is why we practice in parks or practice in the class. But with some experience, you will be able to adapt your Tai Chi and practice in a smaller space. Jokingly, I say that someone who's accomplished in Tai Chi can practice in a telephone cabin. Jokingly, because there are very few of them left. If you can find one, give it a try. Why not? So practice, you can break down the sequences as I mentioned earlier. You can find a way to practice. It's up to you. In a small apartment in the city, or if you have a basement in your house, or I wouldn't suggest falling on the practice on the roof in case you fall. I'm not responsible. Whenever, wherever you can, where you feel comfortable, where your body is relaxed, that's a good practice space for you. The form can be cut in terms of lessening the repetitions. That reduces the necessary width and depth of the space that you need to practice. Instead of doing wave hands through clouds 5 times, you can do it once and then go straight to the next thing. Same thing with repulsed monkey and part the wild horse's mane. All the movements that repeat, you can cut the repeats, and that will bring the space down to a more manageable size in terms of your practice possibilities and your practice space. So practice makes permanent. Conscious practice should be able to free us, and there we gain the pleasure of movement, which is one of the major attractions of Tai Chi, I find. The movement in space, to enjoy, to feel this beautiful thing that we have, and feel life in us and around us. There's nothing like, it's a wonderful thing, Tai Chi. I mean, there are many wonderful things in the world, but Tai Chi is definitely one of them. So I hope you enjoy your practice. The more you practice, obviously you're going to improve, but obviously I also believe that you will get more enjoyment from it. And let's leave on a note that is, the thing is that Tai Chi is a question of self-discipline. We go to classes to learn and to have our postures and our movements corrected by the teacher, and also to share with other students. And one thing that is traditional that we don't do so much here in the West, I notice, is that the students should get together outside of the school and practice together and exchange and work with each other. This is another way of developing Tai Chi quite quickly as regards to being totally alone and practicing only in class or whatever. So that is another one, another type of practice that is definitely useful. But ultimately, Tai Chi, the study and learning of Tai Chi, is a self-discipline. Because the final practice is alone with the form, even though push hands is essential, applications practice is essential, we have two-person exercises, we have a whole bunch of them, routine and so on, all these are essential. But the last thing that we have, everything comes down to, I'm not explaining this well, but everything comes down to you and your form, and your practice, your individual practice. So this is up to you. No one can help you to practice. We can encourage you, we can practice for you. So there are times when you don't feel like it, depending on who you are and your life experience, your attitudes in life, what you feel Tai Chi is worth, and so on. So when you don't feel like it, those occasions are the richest ones, in my experience and from observing others. Because then you have to overcome the resistances that you have, whether they are physical or energetic, or they're usually mental, psychological, or feeling like, oh no, I don't feel like it. And then we're going to justify and make excuses and so forth. This is a struggle that everybody, each individual has to work with with themselves. But if you do find yourself resisting regularly to practice, just try a couple of times to say, no, I'm not going to listen to the inner voices. I go and do my practice and see how you feel. Usually, you will see, usually as soon as you make a decision, you go against those resistances, those negative voices, you get a burst of energy. And you will get that energy, and the chi will flow, and you will enjoy the practice, and you love it. Great. Do it more often. And then you'll get to a point, hopefully, where most of the time it's now like that for me. Not always, but most of the time I'm dying to go to practice. In the morning I wake up like, yes, I want to practice, because it's such a wonderful thing. I hope you get to experience that yourself. So I will leave this subject here for now. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you absolutely great practice. See you soon.